Manhattan Beach, the latest novel by Pulitzer Prize winner Jennifer Egan.
This thing is like the conversation starter everywhere in
Almost
my
as
building.
good as having a dog, right?
At the heart of the book is the Brooklyn Navy Yard during World War II, where women were asked to do what had been a man's job.
Some women talked about open hostility, like men yelling, "Go back to the kitchen."
When Egan had her own doubts about the writing, it was all the details she uncovered that kept her going.
There was a lost and found section. It included things like dentures.
2 Chinese immigrants come to America. Years later, they find daily inspiration in Prospect Park.
It's like a private backyard. Lakes and the leaves and the paths.
Following the creative process within the marriage of 2 artists, as seen by their son, a filmmaker. And how do you see the city around you, if you're visually conscious? Images from the photographer who goes by that name.
These types of places definitely disconnect me from society. If you're following what other people say, then you're not going to be able to experience your whole self.
Ride along this week as we go in on Documenting Brooklyn. Every holiday season, somebody breaks out a photo album. And for anyone who thinks an Instagram account is an inalienable right, a photo album is last century technology for compiling images taken with an actual camera and then processed onto paper. 3-ring-bound sticky cardstock with yellowing adhesive and fingerprint smudged plastic covers, all protecting gap-toothed snapshots from our youth and glimpses of relatives already gone. Images that provoke giggles and jabs about who's lost a little hair or gained a little weight. A photo album may be the perfect device for family memories, but how does a place like Brooklyn protect its collective memory against the passage of time? An author who dives into the archives and surfaces with a story of war fought on a world scale and on Brooklyn shores. Or a family of immigrant artists starting a new chapter while taking an unblinking look at their new country. Or maybe it's a young man, camera in hand, employing his visual consciousness on the ever-shifting cityscape. History matters, and so do the people who record it. People like the staff here at this gorgeous library inside the Brooklyn Historical Society, where documenting Brooklyn is a full-time vocation. When I was a kid, I read every biography in my elementary school library just to see how people lived and came to shape the world that we share. So that's the challenge. How will the way you live help change the world for the better? If you haven't thought about it, maybe it's time. And if you've only thought about it, it's time to get started. And it's time that we got started as we go in on Documenting Brooklyn. Inside Brooklyn's Borough Hall, there's an office you may not know about, but they've got your number, literally.
Topography. Hey, Kelly.
Hi, Brian. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How you doing today?
Good.
So you ready to show me some maps?
Sure. What do you want to know? What do you want to see?
I want to know everything. I want to see everything you have to show. Maybe we should start with my address. So which book am I in?
You're right there on the corner.
This is me?
That is you.
Awesome. As if by magic.
There are 21 books for the borough that create the borough of Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Because
all these books lined.
all these books, right, aligned
counter.
are on the counter.
There's my house.
Oh, cool.
There's my building. She's blue. That means it's
That
concrete.
means concrete, yes. And then what we have here, besides a larger scale of the street system, all right, we also show the status of the street.
So you can learn a lot about Brooklyn by
Yes,
like
yeah, when the
reading
streets.
Yeah, but like we talked to a novelist, some photographers, but you can learn a lot about this place from just looking at the maps.
Correct, yeah.
Manhattan Beach, a Brooklyn destination, and the latest title from author Jennifer Egan, who took a deep dive into history. Jennifer Egan is a woman who can write her own ticket. The Brooklyn-based author was awarded a Pulitzer Prize in 2011 for her book, A Visit from the Goon Squad. Her latest novel, Manhattan Beach, set largely in the Brooklyn Navy Yard of the late 1930s, is the story of a young woman's path to becoming the Yard's first female diver. Set against the criminal underworld of New York City and the larger world at war. A bestseller, it's garnering universal praise and making Best Book of the Year lists.
I've been walking around with this book, and it's like if I was a single person or not inclined to fidelity, this thing is like the conversation starter everywhere in
Almost
my
as good
building,
as having a
on
dog,
the subway.
right?
It is, because people know you're not so dumb. You're reading a Jennifer Egan book and everyone wants to talk about this thing. So how are you feeling about the reception that it's gotten?
I feel incredibly relieved and kind of incredulous. I can't even believe I published another book.
Yeah.
I truly thought, because I can't overemphasize how little faith I had in this project about 2 years in.
Yeah.
And the reason I didn't quit is that the research itself still felt really alive and vital to me. And I thought, if I can read a book called How to Abandon Ship on the elliptical machine at Crunch Gym, if this feels like essential, exciting reading for me, there has to be a reason. I'm still in it.
This book is at a moment when the world conspired to change the lot of women. And right now we're at a moment where a lot of things are happening that may shift for a sea change for women. What do you think about those parallels?
It's kind of fascinating because, women were invited, or rather, begged, would maybe be a better word, to enter into the world of industry, heavy industry in America, because the men were not here and there were simply not enough hands to do those jobs. So the whole Rosie the Riveter campaign was about persuading women that it was a good idea to do this work they had been told all their lives they could never do. But, for example, at the Brooklyn Navy Yard, there were all kinds of protections in place to make sure that, bad situations didn't arise from having men and women together. For example, they weren't allowed to go on ships for, I think, at least a year and a half. And they weren't allowed to go on ships because the idea was men and women in close quarters. This is a bad idea. Ships are very tight, compressed spaces. But what they were acknowledging was, or at least seemed to be suggesting, was that men in particular might not be able to control themselves in this work environment with other women. And you'd say, well, that's absolutely crazy. How could anyone think such a thing?
Fast forward to today.
Some women talked about open hostility, like men yelling, go back to the kitchen, usually as a group, yelling at women as a group. But on the whole, they spoke of the respect with which they were treated, and I think to some degree that respect was sort of required. I mean, it wasn't appropriate for a woman to even be really alone with a man, except under certain circumstances. So I feel like there were all these cultural protections, restrictions, which were annoying, but they served a purpose, and now we have none of that, and yet the kind of crazy aggressive behavior that those things were supposed to be inhibiting seems to actually be going on.
So did you know what the end was when you started? Do you hear voices?
Not at all.
What's your process?
My process is I start with a strong sense of time and place. In the case of this book, that had evolved from New York during World War II, which is pretty general, into waterfront, Navy Yard, deep sea diving. I knew all of those things would be involved, and I had done some kind of experiential research into all of those worlds. I'd interviewed a lot of people.
You got the kit on.
I had worn the dress, the 200-pound dress. So I had done some stuff, but I had also been publishing other books. I mean, when I wore the dress, that was 2009. I hadn't even published Goon Squad yet.
So back in 2009, you put on this 200-pound dress. Do you like go home and make a note about that? Like, how do you keep those different rooms in your brain inhabited so you can come back and write something so rich years later?
I barely remembered what it felt like to wear the dress by 2012 when I started writing. I certainly had never really known what it was like to dive, even though I had interviewed a lot of people, including a World War II Army diver whom I met in 2009, and thank goodness, because he passed away, I think before the end of that year, although he was in perfect health when we spoke. So I had this kind of store of experiential research. I had been present for and or conducted a lot of interviews, which was helpful because those voices were sort of in my head, and I also had notes of all of it. When I sat down to write, I discovered that all of that amounted to basically zero. I had no fucking idea what I was talking about. Like, I couldn't do a thing.
Oh, that just makes me hate you, because 400 pages later, you wrote a damn good book. Where did it come from?
I immediately began researching and researched the entire way through.
This place was so specific to the book and such a character. I wonder how you balanced all the people who inhabited the Navy Yard, because I'm thinking of the guys at the gate, I'm thinking of the lines, I'm thinking of the spaghetti for lunch, and I'm thinking of the bike rider on the dock and what it meant for her to fall down, and the guys, and this place you imbued it with such life.
I felt like I got imbued with all that life, literally all from research. Every single thing you just mentioned has an actual real life corollary coming from my research. The Ship Worker, which was the publication, the newspaper that was produced by the Navy Yard, was incredibly helpful because, like any local newspaper, it got incredibly granular. I mean, it was literally, I think there was literally like a lost and found, there was a lost and found section. It included things like dentures. I mean, these little details were so amazing. I had maps of the Navy Yard at different points taped to the walls of my office. Several people mentioned the smell of chocolate. And then when I was looking at photos of the Navy Yard in the National Archives, lo and behold, on Flushing Avenue, a glimpse of a chocolate factory. So it began to create a sort of mesh of knowledge and experience that felt like my own enough that I could really draw on it. No one is as interested in the Brooklyn Navy Yard as I am and as people here are. I really do want to geek out about this research, and that's actually serious danger as a fiction writer, because geeking out, what that really means is giving the reader more than they need to know, and that's a drag. And some reviews have said that I have done that, and I'm not surprised. I hope it's not true, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're right, because it's not, I used to think when I would read people geeking out, oh, they're showing off. But it actually isn't. It doesn't come from that. It comes from love.
Fully aware of our geek status, we ventured out to the Navy Yard's dry dock, where the USS Missouri, America's last commissioned battleship, was launched in 1944.
This whole place is ready for its second act. And there's going to be a new generation of industry and innovation that happens in the Navy Yard. I just want you to give respect to the folks who came here, who we are losing every day.
I know.
Who really informed the way this story happened.
I feel so lucky to have had a chance to talk with them and meet them. And I'm so glad that they were willing to have their stories commemorated and really be part of the fabric of this place. I also feel like one thing I got to witness that was exciting was the Navy Yard taking charge of its own history and finding a way to sort of present that history and also give the public a portal through which to experience it, and literally a portal into the yard. There are amazing tours of the yard now that none of that existed when I first started coming here. You know, it's a moving, changing environment, and it was really a joy to get involved in really the last generation of people who have living memory of this time during the war. And I'm glad that I was able to help a little bit with capturing their stories.
About 20,000 maps in the wall, this whole wall itself.
And they're all like scrolls?
Yes, they're all scrolled, they're all...
Do I just pull?
Yeah, just pull.
Oh, yeah. So each of these represents a cross-section of
It
Brooklyn.
represents a section, right, whether it be a street or a large location, depending on, you know, whatever the map was made for. It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot, and it has a lot of not just mapping in the sense of, for the office and, this is what we did to this street and the grades and the dimensions, but a lot of historical value also.
So what is the main point of entry for folks who are just like us, who just come off the street and they find themselves and say, that's at Borough Hall? Like, I go there for
Right.
celebrations and
Right,
meetings
exactly,
and
yeah.
all kinds of things, but 2 floors up, there's this amazing historical treasure trove.
Yeah, I mean, if they want to know their house numbers, look at their house. Like I said, we have books that go back to the 1800s. If their house existed back then, we
Yeah.
can look that up. You could take pictures and, have a memento in a sense.
Yeah. This book is from 1880.
1887.
It was $100. That was a fortune back then.
Sure, back then, yeah.
Check this out.
Yeah, there's Borough Hall, but
This is
then
where
it was
we are.
It was City Hall.
164 feet, this tower on Borough Hall. These are the steps
they're the
of
steps.
Brooklyn's front stoop.
That's right.
But that's amazing. I'm looking at right where we're standing.
For Arthur Way, creative expression is the family business. Both of his parents are visual artists, and Arthur is a filmmaker, training a camera on his parents' daily meditation on art and its place in their Brooklyn world.
That's me, getting ready to interview Wei Jia and Ling Yan, 2 established contemporary artists, husband and wife, living in Brooklyn. As their son, I'll try to show these artists as real as a family member can.
It's like a private backyard. Lakes and the leaves and the path. Swan, where is the swan? Yeah,
The Swan family, they know us.
yeah, yeah.
Whenever we come, and then they will swim towards us.
We come to Prospect Park every day, sometimes twice a day. It's like our meditation.
Look at that. Wow. Look at this. It's so beautiful. The detail of the
The leaves flowing from the tree give you a feeling of the time passing. These feelings every day influence me or gives me energy to my art.
当一个人给你手指到月亮，你看到的是月亮，而不是这个人的手指。You put the work in front of them. They have to feel from their own experience.
When you get moved, and then you create art, your art can move others. If you say something not true to yourself, it's hard to convince other people.
So I just carry $30 from China to USA for first time, and
You were only allowed to take $30.
and I spent $25 on the Greyhound from bus terminal New York and to the Bloomsburg University. So I have $5 left in my pocket and start my new new life.
recently I have been doing a lot of site-specific installations to bring contemporary art to everyday life, to combine the artwork with the existing objects, to blur the boundary between the artwork and the architectural elements or the elements already there in our life. All the objects in the space, they already have their own stories. When I work there, it's like a dialogue with the past. I try to use the light from the gallery and also the natural light, so you can see the layers of the paper. It looks different at different times of the day. The Chinese handmade paper is naturally to show my identity. The paper is so dedicated for a clash. You will always make mistakes. Things will not go according to the plan.
There are accidents, but there are also controlled. It's kind of a controlled accident.
Yeah.
And you create trouble sometimes.
Right.
You know what you're going, but you create trouble and you solve by yourself.
Yeah, sometimes it looks like
in the process.
Mistake, but I think I can embrace it, accept it. It's like
life.
You know, until now, I didn't really realize the extent of my parents' influence on my own creative and life decisions. I thought I made the decision 100% on my own when I quit my job and bought my first camera 2 years ago. Well, 35 countries and 70 short films later, I'd like to thank you, Mom and Dad.
These are our benchmark and monument maps.
Yeah.
They're made of cloth. They surveyors come in asking for benchmark and monument information. And when a surveyor comes in, they write this information down.
It's like a treasure hunt.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're holding all the maps.
That's right. I know where the X on the spot is. Don't be afraid. Nothing's gonna jump. Nothing's gonna jump out.
And then.
And we're gonna lift up this. There we go.
Protector. The Gowanus Expressway. Now, is this gonna tell me why it's always so congested and horrible? Listen, behind every little case here is a story.
Yeah, exactly. Every mapping has a story.
So what do you want people to know about the topography department that they might not know?
It's very informative, historical. You have to have a love for maps, I feel, and research. I may not know how to do everything from A to Z, but
I'm inclined
I can
to
explain
agree
it
with
at
you.
least, yeah.
Thanks for hanging out with us.
Thank
This
you
is
for
awesome.
coming, and I
awesome.
appreciate that, and showcasing us.
Absolutely.
Photographing life, a simple phrase and an enormous undertaking for an anonymous urban explorer exercising his visual consciousness on the place we call home.
I don't really know what fear is.
going to these places. That's how I unwind. This is my happy place. Yes, it's kind of scary, dark and frightening to other people, but for me,
I think it's wonderful.
This is a lot of risks that I need to prepare for or just keep watch for, but once I pass the beginning, I'm really just exploring.
The natural light coming down, showing each piece, displaying all its forbidden artwork. It's like a gallery in the city, one that maybe I wouldn't get to go to.
wouldn't get to go to, or maybe these artists would never get to throw up or do a piece in. But we found this place that we can make our own.
And it's not just for me.
People with wealth get to see the God perspective, and it's not a view that a common person would get to see. I'm helping more people see.
I created an Instagram. Honestly, I didn't know it would take me this far. It actually got people that are like, yo, keep doing what you're doing, I love your work. Sometimes I get people that's worried. They're not wrong, but I get a sense of feeling that most people care about what I'm trying to show. That motivates me to just keep posting more.
These types of places definitely disconnect me from society. If you're following what other people say, then you're not going to be able to experience your whole self. We all think and do things differently. Each one of us is unique in a way.
This is the story I've started, and I have to finish. We're only human. I'm just a person that wants to make the most of their life.
This episode of Going In is ready for the archives. And speaking of archives, if you want to see it again or check out any of the past episodes of Going In, you can find us at our home on the web at youtube.com/BRIC TV. Thanks for going in with us. See you next time.